filmmaker. I'd love a musician or a filmmaker on the new £20 note, but I'm rather taken with the notion of putting top filmmaker Ray Harryhausen on the back of the £20 note. There's an ongoing social media campaign now, led I suppose by the Ray Harryhausen Society, and we're talking to them later in the programme, to get Mr H on the back of a £20 note with one of his models from his dynamation films like, you must have seen at least one. Jason and the Argonauts is my absolute favourite. I love The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the original Clash of the Titans. Brilliant, and by the way, brilliant. He was an absolute legend amongst filmmakers. I think genius is an overused word. It does apply in his case because I think he affected, even infected the imagination of millions of us.
Now on BBC Radio Berkshire, it's Paul Ross.
Now, whom would you like to see on the back of the £20 note? They're looking for nominations. They wanted somebody arty, filmmaker maybe, musician, composer, artist generally. We've had a campaign started in cyberspace via social media to put one of the undisputed giants of 20th century cinema on the front of the £20 note. Was it the back? I can never work it out. Must be the back. The Queen's got to be on the front, surely. Ray Harryhausen, the man who gave us the stop motion called dynamation special effects in films like Jason and the Argonauts, The Valley of Gwangi, when the cowboys were up against the dinosaurs. Ever seen that film? A cracker. The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the original Clash of the Titans with Sir Laurence Olivier, and of course The Mysterious Island. But should it be Ray Harryhausen, or should it be, here's the thought for you, Carol from Calcott says, Byron, Dr. Bernardo, Shakespeare, John Lennon for his piecework, and maybe Lady Di, although she concludes, Carol, by saying, I don't know if Her Majesty the Queen will actually allow that one though. However, those are Carol's suggestions. What are yours? 0345 900 1041. Who should be on the back of the Apple Core, the score, the £20 note? Should it be Ray Harryhausen? I would say maybe, if you're mentioning Byron, Carol, maybe William Blake, great poet, fantastic illustrator, or possibly, talking of filmmakers, Sir Alfred Hitchcock. He never got a proper Oscar. Should we honour him by sticking him on the back of a £20 note? Keep the calls coming, please, or you can text me 81333, starting your text with the word Barks. All text charged at standard network rates. It's now 6 minutes past 3.
Loving life in Berkshire.
It's a Wednesday, and on Wednesdays, as you might know by now, I like to talk movies. In fact, I could talk movies every single day. It's my favourite art form. I absolutely love a movie conversation, so I'm looking forward to this chat now. We're going to be talking about the movie maker whose work I'm pretty sure everybody listening will have seen, and when you were younger, will have loved, maybe been frightened by, inspired by, moved by, and also wowed by. The genius in question is Ray Harryhausen, a man who made myths a reality in his movies like Clash of the Titans, the original, starring Sir Laurence Olivier, The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, Mysterious Island, and my personal favourite, which I saw on its release in about 63-64 at the Rialto, Leytonstone, Jason and the Argonauts, an absolutely astonishing film. And to mark his work and his life, he died a couple of years ago, a campaign has been launched to get his face onto the new £20 note. He's made the shortlist. If successful, his physog will be printed on the new tender in 2020, which will be his centenary. Joining us now is John Walsh, trustee of the Ray Harryhausen Foundation. Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon, Paul.
Now, for those who don't know, who was Mr Harryhausen?
Well, Ray was more than an animator. He actually came up with the ideas, he wrote the stories. So unlike special effects people who come on board to bring the magic, Ray actually created the magic from the very start point, from the pen on the page. So from the screenplay to designing to bringing the cast and crew together and then finally creating some of the most memorable monsters in movie history.
And they still look, I think, real in the way that CGI can't. I know some people combine CGI with model work or with explosions or whatever, but while the Clash of the Titans remake and its sequel were good, it hasn't got the magic of Ray Harryhausen's original because it's not dynamation, it's not that stop-motion special effects.
That's right. You know, the creatures don't physically exist. You know, computer graphics tries to be what's called photoreal, but actually Rays were photoreal. They were real creatures that had little armatures inside that were covered with rubber and hair and had their own fangs and claws and so on. So because things exist in the real world, it gives them a real dimension. And for the new Star Wars that's coming out from J.J. Abrams this Christmas that everyone's very excited about, he's gone back to using very large models to get that real physicality. So it's a big move away now from CG.
Now, it's said that genius is the infinite capacity for taking pains, and if that is the case, and I'm sure Ray was a genius, because I think the skeleton fight sequence in Jason took about 4 months, that one sequence, didn't it?
That's right. And, incredibly, Ray worked entirely on his own, whereas now you'd have a team of people working together.
All going quietly mad together in a room, whereas with Ray it was just all his own work.
Absolutely. And I think he would have gone mad had he had people helping him. So he was quite the opposite. I used to say, why didn't you have an assistant? He said, John, that's an extra element to worry about. I want to be focused.
Now, you met him, I think, back in '88, is that right? How did you come to meet him?
Well, I plucked his name out of the telephone book. I was a student at the London Film School, and I was looking to make a documentary, and I was very interested in his work. I knew he lived in London, got one of those big old-fashioned BT phone books out, and this was around 1989. And I had to ask my parents first, could I use the phone? Because back in those days, no one had mobiles. You couldn't just use the family phone. I rang him up. He answered, and his booming American voice, sounding like Charlton Heston. I said, Mr. Harryhausen, I'd love to make a documentary about you. Of course, I made the short film. Tom Baker narrated it for me. It's recently been remastered and donated to the foundation. But I stayed in touch with Ray all those years and helped record commentaries, funded those a few years ago. And he asked me then to be a trustee of his charity, the Ray Harryhausen Foundation.
And I've seen your documentary. It's very good indeed. In fact, it's narrated by Tom Baker, former Doctor Who.
That's right, yes.
And of all his films, there are a couple I think are underrated. Maybe the reasons they're not shown enough. I loved and still do Mysterious Island, the kind of sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But also The Valley of Gwangi, Cowboys and Dinosaurs. What's not to love?
Well, it's interesting. Most of Ray's films were made with Columbia Pictures, and they knew how to market and successfully re-release his films. The Valley of Gwangi wasn't made with them. It was made with Warner Brothers, and I think there'd been a change of management at the time when that film was in production, then was released. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? Westerns and dinosaurs. What's the audience for that?
Everybody, John. Everybody.
Well, absolutely.
Cowboys and dinosaurs. Oh, you had me at the word cowboys, and you throw in dinosaurs. I'd never leave the cinema.
But as you said, Paul, you're quite right. The film has gathered momentum. It's much loved. And Gwangi is one of the figures in the collection that's recently been restored. So hoping to show that very soon. OK, more conversation with John Walsh, of course, from the Ray Harryhausen Foundation on BBC Radio Berkshire after a bit of this. On BBC Radio Berkshire, that's Katy Perry with Raw, and we're in conversation with John Walsh from the Ray Harryhausen Foundation. He's a trustee of the foundation, and we're talking about the campaign to get Ray Harryhausen's face on the new £20 note to be issued in 2020. So you've made the shortlist then, John. You pleased with that? I'm delighted. I'm thrilled.
Are there other filmmakers on it? Because I know Sir Alfred Hitchcock's name's been mentioned in this context as well.
Yes, there are. I mean, under visual arts, I think the Bank of England wanted to throw the net quite wide. I mean, I had a look through the list. There's other animators on there. Bob Godfrey, who made Rhubarb and Custard.
Oh, yes, of course.
Show? He's on there. There's fantastic other special effects people. Derek Meddings, who did the Bond special effects and Superman. Derek Jarman, Freddie Francis, John Schlesinger, who I met when I joined the Directors Guild. Stanley Kubrick is on there. So there's some fine names. So
you don't have to be British then, because neither Ray nor Stanley Kubrick, of course, were Brits.
No, they weren't. But I mean, significantly, Ray Harryhausen, brought major UK productions here long before Spielberg and Lucas was doing it in the 60s. So major studio pictures were shot at Shepperton and at Pinewood using all Brit crews. So really brought a fortune into the economy.
Now, looking back, of course, he actually worked with some incredible people and met some incredible people. He was trained by or mentored by the great Willis O'Brien, who gave us King Kong, and I think he worked with him on Mighty Joe Young. But he also knew as a younger man the great American science fiction and fantasy writer Ray Bradbury.
Yes, they were childhood friends. Ray's first foray into solo animation was The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and that was based on Ray Bradbury's short story that appeared in the Washington Post. And they stayed great pals all the way up until when Ray Bradbury sadly died 4 years ago, and then Ray passed away 2 years later.
And did he have any unfinished projects? I know there were things he worked on or started as a much younger man, but were there things he was working on to the end?
Yes, there were. I mean, for every single film that came out, you mentioned Golden Voyage of Sinbad and Jason and the Argonauts, there was 2 or 3 films that he developed that didn't go any further. So before George Powell developed War of the Worlds, Ray had planned a film using the original tripods, so the Martians on their legs, walking through Victorian London. So that would have been fabulous. We have test footage of that.
Oh, with the kind of octopi monsters.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Ooh, brilliant.
So for every one that you saw in the cinema, there's 2 or 3 that were developed, and we have all of the paperwork, some of the models and test footage at the foundation in our archive.
Absolutely fascinating. And also, was he involved slightly more loosely with 1 Million Years BC, the Racker Welch film?
No, he was. That was him. That was Ray completely. He made 1 Million Years BC, and in fact,
because again, that was a huge hit in the 60s, wasn't it? But it's very rarely re-shown.
It's not often reshown. I think it's to do with the copyright. Warner's owns some of the Hammer catalogue, and interestingly, Hammer are known for their wonderful horror films, but financially, 1 Million Years BC still stands as the most successful box office hit that Hammer ever had.
We've got dinosaurs, and not cowboys, but this time dinosaurs and Rackle Squelch in a furry bikini.
Looking
Again, what's not to love?
Well, Ray told me a little insider secret about that Miss Welsh actually used to, much to the annoyance of the continuity people, would take a small scissors and clip the bikini to make it smaller and smaller. So as the film continues, you can actually see her bikini is actually getting more and more indiscreet.
What a shame they didn't make a sequel. It's all I can say. I'm joking, of course. And did he do the other one, the When Dinosaurs Roam the Earth?
No, that was Jim Danforth who worked on that. That was a much lower budget.
It's an interesting film, though, isn't it? You can see he's inspired by Ray Harryhausen's work.
He is. Jim worked with Ray on Clash of the Titans, on some of the Booba the Owl sequences and Pegasus. So that was the only film he brought a couple of animators in to work with him on that. Him and the late Steve Archer, who died a couple of weeks ago.
And we can expect the decision on who's going to be on the new £20 note, I think, early next year. I think it's 2016, isn't it?
That's right, yes. And I hope if he makes it and the note comes out in 2020, just in time for the Foundation centenary of Ray. And we have lots of fabulous things planned for the centenary. And wouldn't it be the icing on the cake to be on the £20 note? In
fact, you very kindly sent us, via email, I suspect, a mocked-up £20 note with Ray and a dinosaur figure. Can people see that online anywhere, John?
Yes, they can see that on our Facebook page, the Ray Harryhausen Foundation. Also, we're on Twitter and on the internet as well at harryhausenfoundation.com.
Now, I still think my favourite of his works is Jason and the Argonauts. Have you got a fave?
Mine is The Golden Voyage of Sinbad with Tom Baker and Clash of the Titans in 1981.
Great talking to you again. John Walsh there from the Ray Harryhausen Foundation, speaking to BBC Radio Berkshire about a true cinematic genius.